Welcome to another episode of Creating Cultures that Outperform. I hope you didn't miss episode one in our series on increasing workforce productivity. This is an incredibly timely topic. For the next couple of months, maybe three, we're going to be covering different things you should be doing to increase the productivity of your workforce. This is very, very, very important. This is episode two. In episode two, we're really going to be going over safe culture. In episode one, we went over the importance of strategy, planning, and organization. That's where work begins. You should absolutely go back and look at that episode. You've got to get that right, because if you don't, productivity is going to be challenged. Productivity is the most effective and efficient use of talent. If you don't get strategy, planning, and organization right, it's going to be ineffective and inefficient throughout the entire year. And that's just a fact. It hampers everything. But today we're going to talk about safe culture. Safe culture is really, people now understand where they're going. You've charted the course, you've got them animated to go work on this strategy, to understand why it's important. All that communication took place. Now you're going to make sure that safe culture is in place. And Terri, I'm going to let you start that off.
Yeah, this is another big deal. People don't really think about it being a big deal, but it's so important for people to feel that emotional safety at work. If you're in that fight or flight mode all the time, then your productivity automatically takes a hit
Mhm.
as you can't think clearly. When you feel like you're emotionally not safe at work, where you can't be honest, you can't be open, you can't share, you don't trust the organization, that is a big flag that creates this sense of anxiety and raises your cortisol levels. You get to that
Yep.
place where you're constantly in that fight or flight mode. And, once you're in there, you're not really being clear in your thinking. You're not analyzing things properly. You're only trying to figure out how to survive, how to protect yourself in that environment. So you really do want to make sure that as a leader, you're creating an environment where people feel safe, like they can actually trust their leadership and be open and honest. They're not just hiding things from leaders, but they're really telling the truth. You want people to tell you the truth. Sometimes the truth is hard to take. And I remember that movie, You Can't Handle the Truth. What movie was that? That's the first thing that came to my mind.
Famous,
Um, A
famous
Few
line.
Good Men. It was A Few Good Men.
You good man, right,
But
right.
that is so true. You really do want people to tell you the truth. You want them to be honest. You want them to feel safe enough to say how things really are, because you can't fix the problem if you don't know what the problem is. So
Right.
you've got to have people that are willing to be transparent, that are willing to be vulnerable and really share how they feel. And then listen to people when they start telling you things. Pay attention to the words that they're using, because people will tell you how safe they feel in the organization by what they do and what they say. So really pay attention to that, because it's super important. It creates the foundation. We talked last week about creating this foundation of with your strategy and planning and your organization. Safety is right there at the bottom. It's that long piece at the bottom of the pyramid where people have to ultimately feel safe above everything else.
Right. And as you put your new organizational structure in place, you've got to really make sure people feel safe. And a lot of things we spoke about last week, which is people having clarity around the roles and responsibilities, that really creates a feeling of safety in the organization, because you're not stepping on somebody else's turf. These things are so important. And so that, psychological, emotional safety, the ability to be yourself. And we'll talk about that some more as we move into caring culture. Honesty, people being honest with one another.
Yeah.
Uh, Humans have a real sense when they're not being told the truth, when there's a little dishonesty going on. That's going to make people feel unsafe in the workplace. So you got to have honest conversations with one another. The leadership has to be, completely open and transparent about what they're doing and why they're doing it. If they aren't, people are going to suddenly say, "Wow, they're leaving something out for a reason. I get it, and I'm not trusting them." And now you get down to that interpersonal trust, which is another piece of psychological emotional safety. You've got to have that interpersonal trust in all interactions. Trustworthiness is indispensable. It is just such a valuable currency in an organization. And there's a quote here: safety is a small investment for a rich future. Terri suggested we use that. I think that's true. It's a small investment. You've got to understand human psychology. You've got to work on all these human factors of productivity. Safety is a big part of it. You want to build that safe culture. It really matters. You've got to actually make sure the normative behaviors make it really uncomfortable for people to do things that are untrustworthy, to not be honest with one another, to do anything that impairs somebody's feeling of self-worth. This is just super important. And
Yeah.
so another quote here: safety isn't expensive, it's priceless. Because you've spent all that work and time and energy nailing the strategy. If you don't have safety, you're going to have an engine that just misfires. It's ineffective use of human capital. That's what that is. And so you've got to make sure that the talent's being used effectively.
Yeah. You also don't want to blindside people. So, as a leader, you want to discuss things privately with people before you bring them up publicly. But the same is true in reverse. Don't blindside your leaders with information that has not been shared with them in a setting where they have time to process it and really understand it. You want to make sure that you don't make people feel attacked. And that's one way that people can feel attacked in the workplace is when you blindside them on purpose, publicly
Oh,
bringing up things that you haven't talked to them about
I've
before.
seen those cheap shots in companies
Yeah.
so many times over the years, somebody trying to get a little advantage over somebody else. Petty,
Yeah.
petty, petty stuff that's so damaging.
Very petty, very petty. And it does damage the organization. It damages the leader's trustworthiness as well as the people. So you don't want to be in that space where, people are operating with those hidden agendas that cause them to, maybe do things that aren't so open, and they're doing things underhanded and behind the scenes, and they're not really sharing openly. That kind of an environment just breeds distrust. And again, these are things that are a vibe. People pick up on it. It's not necessarily something that's spoken. People will pick up on the behaviors in the organization, and they understand this is what you need to do to survive in this organization. So you
Yeah,
want people to feel like the vibe of this organization is it's a safe place to work. It's a safe place where my leaders care about me and they really are concerned about me as an individual. They care about my well being. They don't operate with hidden agendas. They're not withholding information for the purposes of manipulation. They are really sharing openly and honest with me, and they've clearly defined my roles and responsibilities. They want me to understand what's expected of me. There's nothing worse than having a leader have expectations and never share them, yet they rate you on your performance review based on some
right.
internalized expectation they had that they never communicated to you. That
Yeah,
is horrible, a horrible way to lead people by
it's
never
horrible.
really sharing what you really want, just making them do task after task to say, no, that's not it. No, that's not it. It's really it really sends people on a in a circus and they really are just going around and around trying to guess at what you want. Instead of, as the leader, you should just be open and honest about what you want, what you expect, what will exceed expectations. Say that up front. Don't make people have to try to figure that out.
Right. Be open and transparent. That's fairness too, right? If you're going to be judged
Yes,
on something, you ought to know how you're going to be judged. And so
absolutely.
that's really important. As you get into this, hidden agendas. I remember years ago, one of the companies I worked at, there was a person there, and this gentleman happened to be named Steve. He always had hidden agendas. And it got to the point where it was just so obvious. We used to all laugh behind this person's back. And there was a big meeting one day, and he said, I have something to share today. And probably with 30 people in the meeting, and somebody got up and, said, "Hey, Steve, is that the real agenda or the hidden one? What are you sharing today?" And it was just so perfect, that he got called out on it finally because everybody knew. And, when people have hidden agendas, that lack of transparency really makes people feel uncomfortable. They know that it's an emotionally threatening thing, no question about it. And you've got to be open, upfront, and honest about stuff. And, as a norm in a company, you want it to be something like we tell the truth, both good and bad. You want that total honesty. You want people acting with integrity. This is how you create a safe culture. And safe culture matters. There's so many behaviors go into it, and so many, things that the organization has to get right in order for people to feel totally safe, fully engaged in the workplace, fully accepted. This is really, really important stuff. It is what ultimately allows you to pick up a head of steam now that people know where they're going and how they're going to get there, which is the whole strategy planning org piece. Now you're engaging them in the proper way at work, the most effective use of talent. That's what this is. No question about it.
And you want people to operate in integrity. These days, it seems like people have their own truth or their own way of doing things that doesn't automatically include operating in integrity.
Yeah.
So you as a leader have to own the organization's culture and enforce that we operate in integrity at all times. We're not going to ask people to do things that are just kind of a little gray. We're not going to ask people to do things that are all out shady. We're just not going to do that to people. We're not going to put them in a position where they have to make a decision between should I operate in integrity or should I do what my manager has asked me to do. It's just not a good place to have people. People have their own way of doing things and thinking about things. So as a leader, being able to set the tone for, in this organization, we operate with integrity and honesty and openness. It is huge. It is going to set the foundation in the right way.
Yeah. And so this really matters. It's another element in creating a productive organization. If you want to increase productivity, this is another excellent area to look at. So next week, we're going to be going into episode 3, and actually we're going to be talking about organizational trust. So now you're working on psychological safety is very much interpersonal trust and strategic trust, which is trusting the leaders. They have the strategy, they're going to get you to a good place. Now we're going to take a look at fairness and equality. Those have to be present. They are big derailers. You've got to make sure that they're there in the organization, present. Everybody's embraced the right norms to make sure everything is operating in a fair and equal way. We'll talk about that in the next episode. We're here every Wednesday at 3:00, and we're on a journey to find out how to increase productivity and make your organization one of the most effective and efficient in your industry.
Yes, absolutely. These are some keys. This set of episodes that we're pulling together for this series, this is a blueprint. You can literally take each episode and implement a little bit at a time and watch your organization transform right before your eyes.
Oh, the amount of productivity. I mean, the average organization is more than 40% unproductive, really, because, if you look at the average, on average, companies are about 40% unproductive. But if all companies were good, these companies would be way down the list. So the opportunity is enormous because not many companies are well calibrated. Leaders don't understand the human factors of productivity. They don't work on this. And as a result, every company is really sub-optimized, even if they're doing a much better job than their peers. They haven't taken this nearly as far as they can go. I mean, these are unbelievably powerful areas that you can work on to improve the effective use of your talent, which is what productivity is.
Yes.
So please join us next Wednesday. We look forward to having you there and continuing on this journey together with us.